Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Code and the Coding Coders Who Code It. I am your host, Drew Bragg, and I'm joined today by repeat coding coder, Jeremy Smith. Jeremy, if anyone didn't listen to your last episode or are unfamiliar with you in general, could you do a brief introduction?
Yeah, my name is Jeremy Smith. I have been a Rails dev for a pretty long time, maybe since about 2009, I think. I have worked as an independent developer, a freelancer consultant for the past 11 years under the name of Hybrid Studio. And outside of my consulting work, I like to get into a lot of random Rails and Ruby related projects. In the past couple years, I have put on the Flourished Ruby with my co-organizer, Mark, co-host the Indie Rails podcast with my good friend, Jess, and I've been doing some conference speaking and also do a lot of just side app projects. One was Rails Inspire. That's one I did a year or two ago. Yeah.
Well, you're a busy man, so it's a long list of things that you are involved in. And I think we're going to get into some of that because the way this is going to work is I'm going to ask Jeremy 3 questions. I'm going to ask him what he's working on. As you could tell from the list, this is going to be a good one. What kind of blockers he has. If he doesn't have a current blocker, he can talk about a recent blocker he had and how he went about solving it. And then the last question is, what's something cool, new, or interesting that he's recently learned or discovered or even built? It doesn't have to be coding related, but the name of the show is Code and the Coding Coders Who Code It. So it absolutely can be. Jeremy, the busiest man in Rails, what are you working on?
I have 3 different clients that I'm working with right now, and that kind of keeps me busy in terms of my day job. But one of the reasons that I work independently is so I can do all these other projects that I want to get into. I just have a lot of different ideas, and part of what excites me about being a developer is just being able to build so many cool things, but also even more recently has been like the opportunity to try other skills. So like trying to get better at speaking or publishing content. So conference speaking and doing a podcast, that's been really fun, just trying to learn these adjacent skills. But in the past like year or so, I've been really itching to get back into building a new product. Since I was a teenager, always building websites and apps and things like that, trying to make something that other people would use. And I've had many cracks at it over the years, and honestly, very few successes, things that like I made for myself that I hoped would get out there in the world and a lot of people would use. So I've been hesitant in some sense, like in the last year or so, I want to pick like a good one, a good idea for the next thing I build. I keep a document of ideas for apps, and I've had one on there for a while. And I was talking to my friend Jesper at RailsConf in Detroit this year. And we were having this conversation where I just told him all the Rails apps I'd ever built. We just went one after another, just like from the earliest Rails app. Then I was telling him like, and I've got some ideas. Here's one I've been kicking around. And I shared it with him. And it's a new forum tool that I'm building called Liminal. And I've been wanting to take a crack at old school forums. I think they're due for a refresh. There's so many people that are doing chats these days, and not just these days. It's been a while. Like Slack and Discord are huge. They are almost ubiquitous. It's been years now, but I think even Jason Fried had said things several years back about like how chat was often a distraction for deep work, was something they didn't even like at 37 Signals. Of course, they came out earlier this year with Campfire, the new Once product. So maybe he's walking that back a little bit. But I still think that for me, I want to be in lots of communities and be connected to lots of people, but I also need to get into deep work during the day. And I find it very difficult to be in lots of Slacks and Discords for that reason. I'm in quite a few for Ruby groups, for conferences, for my local tech scene, all that kind of stuff. So for all those reasons, I've been thinking, it would be fun to come in and work on a product like this. And Jesper really liked the idea and he was like, you should do it. And so I was thinking some more. And then he kept DMing me like basically little nuggets of things people said that were adding fuel to the fire essentially. And he sent me like something maybe related to Aaron Francis saying that he needed a forum for everybody that buys his course products. I think he was saying he didn't want a chat product. He wanted like an old school forum. And it was just like, oh gosh, I just need to do this. So I'd gotten back from vacation in Maine this summer and was trying to go through a cool down period where I didn't have any new projects for a little bit. Like I just needed to take a pause, take a break. I'd gone through a really busy period. My daughter graduated from high school. I spoke at 2 conferences, took my daughter to Sweden for one of those conferences. And I needed to like not do much other than just my client work for a little bit.
Sure.
But I lasted about 3 weeks and then I needed a new project. So I decided to go ahead, like, especially after that last thing that Jesper sent me, I was just like, okay, I need to pull the trigger on this and run. And I decided to share it with Jess, my co-host for Indie Rails, and just make a commitment to him to do an MVP by November 1st. So that's all I'm committed to right now. One of the things I learned going through Daniel Vassallo's Small Bets course a couple of years ago was like, not to bet things that you can't afford to lose. And I've done that in the past on projects where I spent years on building products that I didn't get evidence back in a decent amount of time that I was going in a good direction. And so I just kept investing, putting more and more time into it rather than pulling back and saying, okay, maybe this isn't the path to go. So I'm taking a different approach here and just going for an MVP for November 1st, just going as fast as I can to get that done. And at that point, I can then evaluate to say, am I in a good spot for this? Do people seem to like this? Am I getting any positive feedback? And then I can decide, do I continue on or how do I continue it? So that's a little bit different. But it's been really fun so far because just right off the bat, like sharing that with Jess, like he was very positive and then had a lot of people respond like positively to that podcast episode. And just sharing it online with friends and stuff like that, it's been really encouraging. So part of that is, well, it's partly just like nice to have friends that are like encouraging, you know, about the stuff that you want to build, whether there's something there or not. But it's also nice to hear people say, yeah, I have that feeling about forums too, or about chat. And yeah, there isn't something there that's fitting this need I have, or I am frustrated with the tools there. So it's nice when you get that sense that maybe you are onto something, but that's not enough. So that's what I'm doing right now. I'm putting about 10 to 12 hours a week on that outside of my client work. I've been staying up really late, like working on stuff, but it's been fun to get back into that, especially after the last couple of years where it's my projects have been mostly like, oh, let's get this conference talk written or let's put on a conference or things like that. I love all that stuff, but it's nice to get back to building.
And you've also been keeping everyone updated with the weekly updates where you kind of record and talk about what's going on, which I think is also a really cool, I guess people call it building in public. Like that kind of idea of, hey, I committed to MVP by November 1st. And instead of just disappearing until November 1st, here's week 1, here's week 2, here's what's going on. And I think that approach is really cool too and gets the people who were excited, keeps them excited. So I like seeing those updates too.
That's actually been good for me too, because I realized like so many times when I'm building things on my own, both for side projects and for clients where I'm the only dev, you only have yourself to sort of process that stuff with. And being able to basically do a weekly retro with myself has been really helpful. It's really nice to get people's feedback, but it's also just by itself has been helpful just to do that. So that's been a nice win. It does take time, but it's worth it, I think.
I've found that even the weekly updates at work, I say recently, it's been a year that I switched jobs, but it feels recently, were a lot more write everything down that you did the week. And I've always struggled with feeling like I've been productive. And I think that the writing everything down is super helpful because sometimes it's like Friday, I'm like, crap, it's Friday already. I didn't get anything done. I go to write the weekly update. I'm like, oh shit, I got a lot of stuff done. Okay. I wanted to get more done, but I did get work done. So that's a good thing. So it's a super useful tool. And like you said, when you're a solo dev and you don't actually have someone kind of like you're writing it for other people, writing it for yourself is a perfectly valid reason to do it, just to remind yourself of everything that you got done.
I appreciate that idea of recording all that stuff for yourself. Like it's so easy to just forget what you're doing, the ideas that you've had, the good things that have happened in your life. There's just so many areas where writing it down and then reviewing like matters. I keep a kudos file of things like where a client tells me I did a good job on something or where someone like encourages me or tells me something, because I forget that stuff and I don't get feedback that often. So when I get it, I need to keep it. But same with like ideas that you have or things that you're building. So when people are like, oh, what have you been up to? And you just think, oh, not much. That's like the first thing that pops into my head. Not much, right? But that's not true. There's a bunch of stuff. But if you don't write it down, it's hard to remember like in the moment, all those things that you're doing. So I've definitely found, especially in the last couple of years, doing more writing about what I'm doing and keeping track of it has really helped. And it helps you just feel better. Like, wow, I am really being productive, or I do have a lot of cool ideas, or people are saying positive things that are encouraging to me and that kind of stuff.
How on target are you feeling for your November 1st MVP?
I'm feeling pretty good.
That's awesome.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, so in September, I think the second week, I'm taking a group backpacking trip for Rubius called Ruby on Trails. And then the week after that is Rails World. So that's 2 weeks I really won't be able to do much at all. I'll be trying to get a little bit of client work done in the beginning of those weeks. And then otherwise, those are done. But outside of that, I think I'm in good shape. I may have to cut some features, but the main thing I'm trying to do is be in a spot November 1st where I could have some people creating their own forums and then have other people like join and start using them and have the sort of the typical forum feel, like the typical features that you would use kind of in place and locked at a quality level that conveys like what I could do for the rest of the product if I had enough time. It's like, I can't build everything. So I got to focus in on the core of the product and convey the level of quality I think I want to show that I could do if I had enough time. And then enough to give people a sense of, would they pay for this? Would they use this? I'm not focused on people. While I'm saying like I'm annoyed by Slack and Discord and like those kind of chats, I'm not focused on trying to get people to switch off of those because there's so much switching costs there. It's one thing to take a one-person tool and have them switch to something else. I'm going to switch from Notion to Obsidian and it's just you. Okay, that's not a huge deal. I'm going to switch 1,000-person community from Slack to this new tool. That's a big deal. Or even there are much larger communities than that. So I'm focused on people that are thinking about starting a small community. Maybe they develop content. Maybe they have a podcast. Maybe they are starting a local meetup and just need one place to have those discussions, but they don't want it to be chat. And that's what I'm focused on. So if I can find those people and start to get a sense of whether they like it and they have a good feeling about it, that's kind of what I'm aiming at.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it's a slightly different type of communication. Like some people use Slack and Discord for async communications. I'll send you a Slack. I don't expect you to respond right away.
Right.
Like they're using a real-time communication tool for async stuff.
Yeah.
But it would also be weird to be like, hey, you can come out of Discord, a real-time communication tool, and there probably are communities that it'll be a smart switch for, but I think you're on the right path there of maybe we don't just grab everybody chatting in a Discord channel and toss them in an old school form.
And there are good reasons to have chat. I'm not saying like there aren't good reasons. It's just like for a lot of the disparate communities I'm in, that creates a lot of inboxes to check. That's a lot of notifications to go chase down. I have trouble keeping up with it. But if it was like my team, if I was like on a full-time at a company and where it's, of course, like having like always on Slack or chat makes sense. That makes sense to me.
Most of the listeners, I presume, are developers. So understand that building a product is not just crank out the next thing, crank out the next thing. There are lots of roadblocks and hiccups and things that get in the way, which is why we have the next question of what kind of blockers do you have? And if you don't have a current blocker you want to talk about, what's something that recently blocked you? How'd you go about solving it? I just want to take a moment to thank our sponsor, Honeybadger. Do you want higher clarity in production, but don't have time to earn a PhD in observability? Forget logs, metrics, and traces. Honeybadger Insight is built around structured events. When you send your application logs and other events to Honeybadger, you'll unlock the power of Honeybadger's new querying language, BadgerQL. Use BadgerQL to answer any question about your data, convert any event into a metric, and chart your metrics on custom dashboards. You can do all of this on Honeybadger's free plan as part of their comprehensive monitoring suite, which includes error tracking, uptime monitoring, status pages, and more. Speaking of error tracking, did you know that an error is really just a first-class event in Honeybadger? In fact, you can use Insights and BadgerQL to explore all of your existing Honeybadger data in new ways. It's pretty cool. Give it a try today at honeybadger.io. That's honeybadger.io, and thank you, Honeybadger, for your continued support of the show.
Okay, Drew, I'm going to take this maybe in a direction that you might not expect, but this has been a significant blocker to me, and I think is a blocker for a lot of devs out there. And I wish I could say this to myself 3 years ago.
Okay.
Let me paint the picture a little bit. I've been trying to build products for a long time. I love, like I said, since I was a teenager, building websites, web apps, things like that. I build it and launch it to crickets. Build it, launch it to crickets. Just keep building stuff and no one uses it. Or I couldn't figure out where to find users, or I couldn't figure out how to share it. And in the spring of 2021, this is the last time I did something like this where I built something and sent one tweet and then no one responded. And then I was like, well, now what? So this is 3.5 years ago. I had this idea of building kind of like a reverse job board. Okay, so I work with multiple clients at a time. Usually they're long-running projects. I'm usually working part-time. So like right now I have 3 different clients that I work 10 hours a week for. And I don't like saying part-time dev. That doesn't fit like the way I think about myself or even my commitment level to my clients. I think of myself as like being fully invested with this client, just not in a full-time capacity. And people use that term fractional to talk about that. And usually in the idea of like fractional CEO or CTO or something like that. For me, it's just fractional developer. So I had this idea of building this app, Fractional, where people that offer fractional services could create a profile for themselves and say, hey, I offer fractional development services or design services, or I'm a fractional writer or photographer or whatever it is that you need that you offer as a service. I felt like there's no place that people like that can offer their services that other people can find. And I was hoping to build a job board connected to that as well, and then create like some kind of pricing around that, because I would use that. It's not a huge market, but I like that. So I built this whole thing, put it out there, put my own profile up. I had like a friend or two post profiles, and I put a couple of jobs up. And I think I sent a few tweets, but I didn't know what to say. I put it out there. I didn't have anybody to say anything to. Then fast forward 2 or 3 months, and I'm pretty active on Twitter. Usually I'm on Twitter a lot, reading a lot at this point. This 3 years ago. And Joe Mazzolotti starts building devs.com. It is a reverse job board where you create a profile for yourself for the kind of work that you do as a Rails developer, with the ability for people to find you and hire you, and like the ability for him to make connections to jobs. I think I got in there, and maybe it was like user ID 10. I got in there and I actually got a client. I think I was one of the first people to get a client out of that site, but he was getting all this traction, all this response from people. And he was getting maybe hundreds or even more like profiles created. And fast forward like 6 more months, it was like a significant part of his income, or maybe he even switched to becoming his main thing at that point. I suddenly had this like really hard lesson to learn at this point. Like it felt like one of those painful life lessons that you feel like something has to change after this. I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, this is just like what I tried to do, or very similar. Like in terms of the structure of what this app did, they were very similar. It was very similar to what I was doing with Fractional. But I had to go back and say, like, why did he have success and why did I not? And I came up with a few different things. One was he was targeting a niche audience, which was just developers, where I was just saying like anybody that offers fractional services. So he already had a niche identified where it was like really clear who that category was. And I think I was a little early with the fractional idea. I've actually heard that term used way more in the last year than prior to that. And I think I might have been just a little bit early on using that term in a way outside of the C-suite. But nowadays I'm like hearing it a lot more in other areas. So he had this like nice niche identified that was already like predefined. And it turns out those were a lot of people that were following him. So he had a way to connect to those people automatically. But the biggest thing I realized was that like he knew how to market his product. He had a way to connect to an audience and I didn't. And I think that was the biggest lesson I learned, was that I feel like I learned this, like maybe the most succinct way of saying it is like Aaron Francis saying, build things and tell people, build stuff and tell folks about it. And I had spent all this time like building, but not learning how to tell, not learning how to tell a story, not learning how to tell other people what I was doing. So I send one tweet and it goes nowhere. And then I think, oh, well, this didn't work. And it's because I'd spent all this time working on the skills of building stuff and not working on the skills of telling. This to me is like one of the biggest blockers I've had professionally for any kind of project that I want to put out in the world. And I felt like I had to, at that point, like when I saw his success, I realized something has to change, or I need to stop doing this, or I need to just call this like therapeutic coding. Like I'm doing this for myself and no one else,
Sure.
right? Like you can be do therapeutic writing where it's just like you're journaling for yourself, or you can do commercial writing or writing that's going to impact somebody else, but decide which one it's going to be. And I didn't want to just do therapeutic product development. I wanted to like do things that might actually make a difference. Like he did for me, like he made this thing and then I got a great client out of it. I wanted to be able to do that kind of thing too. So the next 2 years basically has been me trying to figure that out. One of the first things was like, I realized that Twitter has been, there are so many problems with Twitter, but it has been one of the best places to connect to people that might care about things that you're doing. And it's much easier to do that than go to individual, even like I'm talking about forums, like even going to like niche forums. It's the place where you can make surprising connections to people where like you have serendipitous opportunities. And I realized I needed to get better at that. And Joe was doing a fantastic job of building in public as he was going, talking about what he was doing, like sharing screencasts, like showing code snippets, all the kind of stuff that people like to see. It's the stuff that I like to see, but I was not making that stuff. That put me on a path to like learn how to use Twitter better, to start sharing code samples, to share what I was learning. I'm still not great at it, but I went from less than 400 followers to over 2,000. And I'm not bragging. What I'm saying is that was because that's not even that many. But for me, it was a dramatic change in the level of connection that I had to people. It's not about follower count or like, I always thought about it being like a popularity contest or something. And what I realized is if you want to make stuff that impacts other people, you have to find a way to connect to them. You have to be with them. You have to talk about stuff. You have to listen to what they're saying too, but you need to be able to talk about what you're doing. And I hadn't been doing it. I just been working alone, kind of siloed away. So that was like one of the big things. Then I also got a lot of practice on the marketing stuff doing Blue Ridge Ruby. And because I'd made a connection to on Twitter in particular, but also at conferences with other Rubyists, like I had this spot to try a new project, which was like a giant sales and marketing project. It's like also this big logistical challenge, but can you even get people to pay for tickets? It's like a big part of that. So I had to paint this picture and tell the story. And what's funny is like for many years, I was building marketing sites or marketing landing pages or even marketing copy for clients, but not doing it for myself. So I had some of those skills, but I just wasn't like using them on my own projects. Anyway, so that gave me a lot of practice there. So fast forward, like that is like the thing that this meta blocker, this is a long way of saying like this meta blocker for me has been figuring out how to tell people what I'm working on. And even just doing it at all has been a dramatic change. And I wish I could go back and tell myself that 3 years ago. So I would have stopped doing that, or even earlier. Like there's so many times that I wasn't aware like how important that was. And maybe also just like nervous about how people might respond to it. But that was another thing of just like being involved more in going to conferences and making friends in real life that translated to being online friends as well, helped make it easier to share things in public because I knew at least somebody that cared about me would see it and be like, that's cool. I'm glad he's doing that, or wouldn't just pick it apart.
Right.
Yeah. So I think that's a huge blocker for devs that want to build stuff, especially on their own. And we like over optimize on the building, thinking we need to spend all this time like learning how to make stuff, but we like forget about how to tell people. And telling people looks different. There's so many different ways to tell people. And there's so many like little micro skills in that. But to be able to make successful products, you have to tell people. You have to figure out how to tell people.
That is something that I think sets some of the more indie developers apart from people who are just regular developers. Say regular. There's some massive difference. But I think the biggest difference is that like how you communicate what you're building to a wider audience. You don't just disappear for a year, build something, and then show up and drop it on, to your point, like to your 400 Twitter followers and one user. It's like, yeah, but if you'd been talking about it for the past year, people get excited, they get ramped up. Like, how often have you seen a movie trailer for a movie coming out in 6 months? And it's like, whoa, now I have to wait. What the heck? But then it gets closer and you get more excited because you're like, I've been excited about this for a while. So it makes sense. But yeah, I totally understand how it can be tough because I went to a coding boot camp. They taught us a ton about coding and building a thing and nothing about how to tell people, who to tell, when to start telling people, nothing like that. So that's a good blocker. Way to go. I like that one.
I'll say one other thing, and that is I thought it was, you said like a lot of indie bootstrappers are good at this. I thought it was just those people were just that way. It was like in their nature. It was like, and maybe for some of them, they are more naturally gifted that way. But I realized it's just a set of skills. Like I learned these other development skills. Like I learned how to build software. I can learn how to do marketing. I can learn how to share things that are interesting to other people. I can learn how to connect to potential users. And instead of seeing that as being like, oh, that's somebody else, I'm not a build in public guy. That's part of what I thought in my head. I'm not a build in public person. I'm not like that. And realizing like, oh, I could be. I can be. Like stop thinking of yourself this one way and start realizing you can learn these other things and then be that way.
I mean, maybe this is personal projection, but there is a fear of failure when you're trying to do something new, right? But like failure is the best way to learn how to do something. So go out and fail a lot and you'll learn a ton of ways to do it the right way. But if you're too afraid to go out and fail, I don't want to build in public because what if I'm bad at it? Well, you got to suck in order to get better. No one starts off the best of the best. So
yeah, Aaron Francis says he has all these little phrases that stick with me. I've heard these things before, but for whatever reason, when he says it, I believe it.
Yep, I can understand that.
He said something like, the worst thing that will happen is that you'll be embarrassed. That's the worst thing that'll happen. And when he says it, I'm like, yeah, that's the worst thing that's going to happen is I'll be embarrassed. But that has kept me from so many things in life. There's so many things I didn't do because I was afraid of being made fun of in public or someone seeing my failure. And I realized that life's too short to be living that way. If there are too many things to do in the world, too many good things that you could do to have an impact on other people with the things that you make, doing the thing that you love doing. If the thing that's holding me back is just embarrassment because I might fail, like that sucks. Yeah, that's a blocker worth getting past.
Agreed. That is definitely a blocker I've heard numerous times. And those are some good suggestions on beating it, especially listen to Aaron Francis. That's a great way of improving. Having him on the show last episode was wonderful. He's a gem, even though he's a PHP dev.
That's right.
We'll leave it at that. Or database guy, as it were, recently.
Right.
So that brings us to my favorite question, although you crushed it on the blocker question, knocked it out of the park. But what is something cool, new, or interesting you want to share with us? It could be just talking more about your form, but it could also be talking about Ruby on Trails or whatever you're jazzed about.
I guess it's like not new to you because we're using it right now, and that is like Riverside.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's good.
Jess and I, we've been using Zoom for podcasting for the first year and a half, that we were doing Indie Rails.
I feel like that's how everyone started. I think Remote Ruby still uses Zoom.
Yeah.
I started on Zoom, hated it, wanted to get off it as fast as possible. But yeah, I think everyone starts with Zoom.
It makes sense. Everybody uses it and you can record the separate audio channels. So that's nice. But we were all recording locally and then I had to collect up the different single recordings and send them all to Paul. And that was really annoying. And so I thought, we should try Riverside, just give that a shot. And it's really nice because everything's built into the app. You're still recording locally, but then it uploads everything to one spot. And then I send one link to Paul to edit or whatever. But what's cooler to me about that is I realized after we started using it, and this was just a month or so ago, I thought, I could do other stuff with this. It does the video stuff. So that's actually how I'm doing the building Liminal videos, these weekly videos that I'm doing. So I'm releasing them on Twitter. And this is part of this idea of building in public, which I always hated that term, but that's what I'm doing. I'm doing it because I want to tell people what I'm making. And I realized I needed to invest some amount of time into doing that. And I thought video was always interesting to me, but I needed a way to do it that wasn't going to be a huge time sink. And so I did Aaron Francis's screencasting course. I love it. I'm planning to make a legit screencasting course at some point, video course at some point, but I needed something quick that I could do just on a weekly cadence and really actually keep up with it. And Riverside turns out does a pretty decent job. And the things that I really like about it are, so you can record audio and video and screen. For me, I'm just doing video. And then it has these AI tools that I feel like an old guy that's, you should see the new AI tools that are coming out. But I never really use them. And what I love is it does the automatic transcription. And then when you go to edit it, it's already pulled out all of your pauses, which is fantastic when you're doing video, or even like I realized with podcasting too. One of the things I never realized is like you could just stop. Like you just stop and don't say anything and think about what you want to say and then start again. And the editor can come in and just like clear that spot out. That's the easiest thing to do. So with Riverside too, like I can just pause and think, okay, what do I want to say next? Then when I go to actually edit, it's actually removed all those pauses. And so then I'm just reading my transcript on one side. And then if I said a sentence weird, I can just delete it, just delete the sentence, and it cuts those clips out. So the edit ends up being much faster than it would be like in a regular video editor. That would take me forever to do. So there's still some things that are a little weird. I wish the final export had the final transcript, because there's the original transcript, which is like the raw transcript from the raw recording. And when you export it, the video, it will put the transcription on the screen, like on the video, like for YouTube, or well, not for YouTube. I'm doing it for Twitter, where the text is like on the video itself.
Yeah, like subtitles.
Well, it's not actual closed captioning. Like it's not like you hit the closed caption button. It's embedded in the video itself. But I wish they had like a separate export of just the transcript. It's the final transcript.
Right, right.
I love it because it's like a really fast tool to share that kind of stuff. And then someone was like, hey, could you turn this into a podcast? I'm like, guess I could. We're already like, we're already doing that. So then it was like really easy to use it for that as well. And it's like a low polish. Like I'm not doing like high polish stuff on this. It's not going to a professional editor, but just for something weekly, it works really well. I think more people should use it, but also it helped me realize like that maybe that's like where video editing is really headed. And maybe people are like that are into video already know that. I'm still stuck in like using iMovie on the desktop or whatever. But it made me realize like Riverside's headed in a good direction for doing even better stuff. So Casper, Tim Hansen, and I, we've done some video, like some screencast stuff with domain modeling in Rails. And we started like exploring using Riverside. It's not quite where it needs to be for what we want to do for like the screencasting, but it's really close. So if they like changed a few things, we'd be ready to use this, and we'd be able to put videos out that are higher quality than what we've done so far, but still like way cheaper and faster than using ScreenFlow or something like that. So yeah, you're probably used to this at this point with Riverside, but I'm still excited about it.
I discover something new in it all the time. I definitely don't use it to its full capacity. I do podcast recording. So that's it. Like we're on video right now so we can see each other, but I don't do anything with the video. Only the audio goes to Paul. Only the audio gets released. But they have a ton of cool things that you can do in video. You can immediately inject media. You have the ability to have like your producer or your editor even in the call, so you can do live stream. They've got all the live streaming stuff built in. It's a really powerful tool that I admittedly am not using to its full potential, but it is a very cool tool. So agreed with the cool, new, or interesting. It belongs in that category. Good call.
Thanks. Yeah.
Well, it was awesome having you on again. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about before we break this episode?
Well, since you did mention Ruby on Trails, so after doing a conference 2 years ago, I realized like it unlocked a thing that I hadn't really known about myself, which is I like creating events or opportunities, like spaces for people to come and join and do something that it may be kind of niche, but for the right people, it's the exact thing that they would want to be there for. And I got that feeling with Blue Ridge that really felt good. It's just such a big lift to do a conference. I want to do them more, but it's really hard to do like just in spare time. But I realized I love backpacking. I love Ruby. What if I put the two together? That would be like such a niche thing. But I have 7 people coming on this backpacking trip. Yeah, so that should be really fun. And I'm hoping to keep doing it. If it goes well, if everybody stays safe and has a good time and I handle the logistics well, I'm thinking like, oh, maybe I could do this like once a year. I go on a couple backpacking trips, a couple trips a year. Usually by myself. Like I've mostly been a solo backpacker for the past 5 or so years, but it'd be really fun to have that kind of experience with other people who don't normally get together or don't see themselves in that setting together. Like how often are you talking tech around a campfire? I mean, maybe you are, but I'm hoping we're one of the rare groups on the Appalachian Trail that's like talking about Ruby gems.
It is really cool that like you get this opportunity to, now you're going on a trip. So you're backpacking with people who there's a shared interest there. We all like backpacking and the outdoors, right? So we have a shared interest, but now you're introducing this secondary, everybody there is also a Rubyist or computer programmer. Now we have two ways that we are similar and can share. Like that's going to be such a cool trip and a cool way of developing friendships that like, because I feel like that's one of the nice things about conferences is you go there and you're guaranteed to share something with everybody there because you're all at the same conference. So we're all Rubyist, or we're all Rails devs, or we're all Python. If, you know, whatever conference you go to, you have that immediate shared something. And then from there, you can just build friendships out of it a lot easier. It's, you know, sort of like being in school. We all go to the school together. And this sounds awesome too, because you're taking this section of Ruby devs and you're getting an even tighter section of Ruby devs who also like backpacking and sticking them on a trail for a few days. It sounds so awesome. I think you're going to have some really cool friends and stories out of that one.
Yeah, thanks. This actually ties back into an earlier point too, which is this was another example of sharing a harebrained scheme on Twitter and just seeing if anybody thought that was cool. And then like when people did, then it was like, oh, okay, I got to do this. And that's how Blue Ridge happened too. I'm realizing like this is still one of the things like that I think is fantastic about Twitter. And one of the reasons why you tell people about stuff you even want to do, not even the things you've committed to doing, but the things you're thinking about doing, because you can gauge the potential response or the potential success based on a little bit based on people's feedback. If people start saying, oh man, that sounds cool. Some of my things that I throw out there, it doesn't go anywhere. But if I see something that does like that, and I had a bunch of people respond saying, yeah, that sounds awesome. So then I just took the next step, build a little landing page in Notion, and then had a little sign up for a mailing list to be notified about it. So you just take the next little step. And then in this case, it wasn't that much more work to just set a date and then say, this is what we're going to do. That makes it really easy to try out these weird ideas that you have. If no one responds, if I'd sent that tweet and nobody said anything, then I just let it go. And it doesn't have to be such a big deal if just one of your ideas doesn't pan out. Just share all of your ideas. And the ones that
Something will
work,
stick.
Yeah, they will. Yeah. That's another thing that I feel like I'm finally learning. Just share the ideas, follow the ones that have energy, where people are excited.
Yeah, follow the energy. That's an excellent suggestion. I love the energy. Awesome, man. Well, thanks for coming on again. Super excited for everything that you're doing and to see you soon, right? Rails World?
Rails World. I'll be there.
Rails World and then RubyConf, right?
Oh, man, I'd love to go.
No, don't say no.
I was going to say congratulations on keynoting. I don't know if I can.
Oh, no. No.
Yeah.
It's all right.
Christy said, how many conferences are you going to this year? And then I thought, okay, maybe I need to stop. Maybe that's like the cutoff point. Maybe in October I can be like, hey, what if I snuck one more in? But yeah, I'm holding off right now.
There you go. Well, hopefully, but at least I'll see you at Rails World here soon. Pretty excited for that one. That's going to be awesome. And also very excited for RubyConf. If you're not going, anyone listening, if you're not going, I highly recommend it. And not just because I'm keynoting. It's always a good time and hope to see you there.
Yeah, what's awesome.
Yeah. Jeremy, thank you again for coming on and we'll talk to you again real soon.
Thanks for having me, Drew. I appreciate it.